transfer it? I hold it because I don't have pocket. This takes it forward. Okay, this takes it forward, and that's released.
Great. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Judy and Mike and I drew the envious duty of speaking right after lunch, where everybody's sitting there feeling mellow, and the only thing worse was a couple years ago I was speaking at a conference at Lake Chelan. And if you don't know where that's at, it's a beautiful lake in eastern Washington. Summertime. I was the next to last speaker in the afternoon. By the time I got done talking, there was only one other person in the room, which is, I guess, a comment on my speech. But so I went over to him and I said, you know, thank you for sticking around. I appreciate it. And he said, well, you can return the favor. I'm the next speaker. So anyway, we're going to talk now against some kind of specialized area of global grants. And the first is Rotary scholarships. And Rotary did me a favor of sending out a scholarship recipient who spoke to us at lunch today and explained what great value there is in Rotary scholarships. And here's the district committee. As you can see by the people, the district places a lot of emphasis on this. And Rose Bowman was an active participant for many years, but unfortunately she passed away a few days ago. But you can see here the breadth of the committee and the importance the district places in this. So there's basically three types of Rotary scholarships. They're all for postgraduate study, for people who already have a BA, or like next week we'll get a BA kind of thing. So each has a little bit of different twist to it. The district Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship, and I think Bill mentioned this morning, this used to be a term Rotary International used, but they stopped at it. But the district felt these scholarships were so important, the district stepped up and will fund a $15,000 scholarship for postgraduate study in a humanitarian area. It doesn't have to be within Rotary's 6 areas of focus. It doesn't have to be at a specific university, except the studies must be outside North America, the US or Canada. So right now, for example, we have an ambassadorial scholar studying in Edinburgh at the University of Edinburgh. Next year's scholar will be studying in London. So that's just a couple examples. But it's a pretty broad area of study, and the district has sole discretion in whether to award the scholarship or not. So one of the things we have trouble doing is getting word out about the availability of the scholarship. So if any of you know a young person who might qualify, you know, please talk to them about maybe looking at this.
Does this lead to an advanced degree, or just a year of study, or is there a requirement?
Right. The question is, does it lead to an advanced degree or what? The ideal is it lead to a master's degree in whatever area the student chooses. So man, it's, you know, electrical engineering, probably not, but humanitarian is a pretty broad category. There are a few exceptions where it's a unique certificate program that involves a substantial graduate level study, but the goal is a MA. So here's basically the requirements for someone to apply and be accepted. Has to be sponsored by a club in our district. That the club has no financial obligation, but the first level of review, if you will, is a club sponsorship. And many clubs actually have a little committee that will interview the person and that. And so when it comes to the district level, it's on the recommendation of a club that this person is a worthy candidate. They have to be a legal resident of the district. Now, with all of us with school and military and that, we were traveling all over, but still our legal residence was, you know, where our parents lived or whatever. So the person could be going to school in Toronto, but as long as they kept their legal resident in Victoria, for example, you know, they're still, that's where they put down as home, that's where they're registered to vote, et cetera, et cetera. Because of nonprofit rules, the applicant cannot be a Rotarian or a direct lineal descendant. That's not our rule, that's the government's rule for nonprofits. Because of the timing issues, the application should be submitted to the scholarship committee no later than September 15. Sir?
So we have Rotary, does that include Rotary students as well?
We haven't used that. So if you're in Rotact, you're not technically a Rotarian yet. So that would be fine. Our millennial there says yay, you know. For studies commencing after July 1st the following year. So typically the studies start in the fall, September or so, but the student needs to understand because of the Rotary's fiscal year, they don't get the funds until after July 1st. They must be made available for interview, and a lot of times it's by Skype. So if it's a big imposition for the person to appear personally, we're happy to do it by Skype. We had an interview yesterday with a young man from Victoria who was applying for a Peace Fellowship by Skype. Last year we had interviewed 2 candidates for the ambassadorial scholarship. One was in New Zealand and one was in Hong Kong for a wedding. So, you know, but they have to make themselves available. And there's a lot of more information on the district website. Just go on to the district website, go over to the left-hand side of the page, scroll down to scholarships, or you can just Google District 5020 scholarships, take you there too. A lot of good information. So our current ambassadorial scholarship is Anya Ebner, just winding up her year at the University of Glasgow. Interestingly enough, her area of interest, of career, is focusing on stolen art and artifacts, the international trafficking of stolen artifacts, and her job is, you know, her goal is to work with UNESCO or some other Interpol or some other agency. Quite an interesting young woman. So the next step up is a global grant scholarship, which is part of the global grant process. You can see the $30,000 number, $15,000 from the district and $15,000 from TRF. But because TRF money is involved, the area of study must be within the 6 areas of focus. Actually, it would be, I think it would be hard to say anything a Rotarian-oriented person would be interested in studying doesn't come within the 6 areas of focus, but that's an art requirement. Application qualifications are the same. Person has to live in the district, has to be sponsored by a local Rotary club, and there has to be an individual in that sponsoring club who becomes the student's mentor and primary contract. So that's a fairly responsible position. And once again, the clubs don't have any financial obligation other than supporting the student that they're sponsoring. So here's a list of some of the past global scholars. You can see the range of study they've engaged in. And it's a somewhat competitive process, so these are really stellar folks. Then we have a fairly specialized scholarship, a Rotary Peace Fellowship, and as I mentioned yesterday, we interviewed a young man who's going to now be referred up to the Rotary Foundation. We don't decide who it is. It's very competitive, but TRF and the university they want to go to decide whether to accept somebody or not. But it's for study with peace and conflict resolution. 5 leading universities around the world. They have to study outside their home country, like many of the scholarships. So, but this is super competitive. So if you talk to somebody who might be interested in that, make sure that they've got the background that would make them a viable candidate for this kind of scholarship. And on RI's website, there's a lot of information about this and global grant scholarships as well. So if you're interested, you can go there too. So this is the process for Peace Fellow applicants. It's a little different time cycle than the district scholarship and the global grant scholarship. But once again, the applicant has to be, for us to sponsor them, a legal resident of the district. So we've been fairly successful in placing Rotary Peace Fellows, some really stellar young people out of our district from both sides of the border. And there's my contact information. And sometimes it's easier to start. Victoria Pitt, who's the outgoing chair, has done a stellar job, is still on the committee. And if you're on the island, and you have an island candidate, it might be good to contact Victoria too. But there's my contact information. My information is also on the district website. So, any questions? Yes?
Do the scholarships qualify for doctoral studies or just master's?
They can qualify for doctoral studies. The key is postgraduate. It's not undergraduate work. Yes, sir. There's one, from RI for the Peace Scholarships. I think, they have several dozen Peace Scholars every year. In terms of our district is basically one a year, because it costs us $15,000. So it can be either an ambassadorial scholarship where it's just the district's money, $15,000, or a global grant scholar where we put in 15 and RI puts in 15. So I think as somebody mentioned earlier this morning, we have 15,000 set aside. Depends how it gets spent. So there's one student a year basically. Yes, sir.
John, I noticed that there was a lot of candidates that came from, sponsored by the Oak Bay, Victoria, Rotary. Is that because the University of Victoria is right there?
I don't know that that's the case, but like many of the things we are involved in, an active club gets more involvement. So they've been very good about identifying potential candidates and pushing them forward. Yes.
I think Vicki Pitt is in that club.
Oh, okay. David said Vicki Pitt's in the Oak Bay Club, so that might explain that. I was going to say it takes an interested Rotarian, but obviously she's very interested in this. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. So, we have trouble getting the word on these scholarships out. We've contacted the four-year universities in Washington and BC to let them know about the program. There was an article in the last district newsletter. I won't embarrass myself by asking you how many actually saw it. But, you know, you're our best advocates. Go home and start thinking about who is getting ready to graduate or has just graduated from college and might make a good candidate for one of these scholarships. Anything else? Yes, sir. Okay. My contact information is on the district website, where you go to the district officers, and if you go down way to the bottom, that's where I'm at. Yes. Yeah, it's part of the PowerPoint for the conference. But basically, if you want to take a note, it's just my name, John W. Hough at Comcast.net. So it's not too tricky. Yes.
Can you define lineal descendant? Like
Can I define lineal descendant? Yeah, it's basically a child or a niece or nephew. A third short-tailed cousin doesn't count, but yes. Grandchild would count. Great-grandchild would count. Dennis? Yes. Yep. And next up is Michael to talk about vocational training teams. And I have to say, for 6 years, I was responsible for VTT teams, and I'm just pleased as punch that Michael's taking that over. He led a VT team to Bolivia to train dental technicians. Maybe he'll tell you a little bit about that. But here's Michael.
I'm not sure where. Okay, never mind. So you click this right here.
Yeah, I have mine.